Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening and welcome once again to the Sulaimaan Ravat show. Now, especially for residents of Gauteng, but citizens of South Africa, throughout the country would have known a few years ago about the whole e-toll saga here in South Africa and how it dominated headlines. And it was at around that time that we started to hear of the organization called OUTA, and they were in the forefront in the fight that time against e-tolls. And many lauded them and applauded them, and correctly so, for taking up the fight. Initially, it seemed like it was David going up against Goliath, but David prevailed to some extent, or to a significant extent. And subsequent to the whole e-tolls saga and issue, and that particular battle and challenge, there have been a number of other issues that OUTA has been dealing with. Now, we have in studio this evening a man who was central to all of that, and that is Wayne Duvenage. We thought it was a good time to reflect on where OUTA started from and the things that they have been involved in over time, and some of the issues that are central. E-tolls and all of those things are issues, but then there are root factors that we need to look at. And these days, there's all the talk about corruption and all these things that are happening at the state-owned entities. They kind of overlap and they're kind of interlinked, and we are going to be discussing and unpacking some of those issues. Wayne, it's always been a pleasure to talk to you over the radio. This time I get the honor and opportunity to talk to you face-to-face in a TV studio. Welcome. Good evening.
Nice to be with you. Nice meeting you.
Let's go back a bit. It's a few years now since the e-tolls issue. At that time, if I remember correctly, you were with Avis, right?
Yes, I was the CEO of Avis.
And how did you get involved in e-tolls? I mean, you're the CEO of this well-established super brand, and all of a sudden you get involved in something like OUTA opposing e-tolls at the time.
Yeah, look, we certainly didn't plan this. It's something that evolved, but what happened in 2010, just after the World Cup, the tourists were going back, the roads were built, or largely built, the freeway upgrade in Gauteng, and suddenly these structures started taking shape. And I recall going to work one morning, and listening to an interview with John Robbie and Nazir Ali, the head of SANRAL at the time, describing, because the public were asking, what are these structures on the side of the road? This is very unusual to see structures like that. And I heard this description from Nazir Ali that said, look, we've built you these lovely roads, but you can't get them for free. What we're going to do is toll you for them. But don't worry, you're not going to have to stop at toll gates. You're going to be able to drive. But what you have to do is just go and get one of these tags, fit it to your windscreen, register your tag with the registration number of your car, and put money into our account. And every time it runs low, you'll get 3 beeps. And I remember listening to this, thinking, and they're talking about launching this within 2 months of that interview towards the end of 2010. And I remember thinking, how is it that as the CEO of the biggest private purchaser of vehicles in the country, with a fleet of thousands of vehicles in Gauteng at the time, that we knew nothing about it? Or maybe I thought I knew nothing. So I started phoning colleagues in the industry, Road Freight Association, AA, number of people, and lo and behold, no one was any wiser to this plan that government had. And this was a scheme that was going to impact on our businesses. I was also the chairperson of SAVRALA, that's the South African Vehicle Renting and Leasing Association at the time. And we had a meeting coming up, and we put our heads together and said, well, we've got to do something, because this scheme's about to be launched. So we set up a task team, we engaged with SANRAL. And what we found over the next year of trying to find solutions for our industry was that this scheme was fraught with administrative problems. There were serious issues for our industry because, tourists were going to be flying out of the airport, going through a gantry. We couldn't bill them live because the information could only come to us the next day. There were dispute resolution mechanisms. Imagine somebody cloning your number plate. Who's going to pay for the bill? All of these things we had to get answers for, and we could see that the scheme was badly planned. They hadn't given a lot of thought. And the technical team we set up to engage with SANRAL to find solutions came to naught. And then we got legal advice. We decided to interdict it or challenge it in court. We won the interdict, and it became extremely busy and hectic for me because I was chairing this body, which now became besides SAVRALA, it became we formed OUTA because it was an association of associations that was tackling this matter. And I had to make a decision. I can't be the CEO of Avis. I'd been there for 6 years in that role and do this. And I really enjoyed my time at Avis, and it was time for something different. I really thought sanity would prevail. I'd take an exit package, and within 6 months, government would come to its senses and I would move on with my life. But this is something that needed full-time attention. Sat down with my family, had to discuss this. It wasn't an easy decision. And 8 years later, it's completely different to what we thought it would be. But it's been an amazing journey. It's been a tough journey. It's been a journey of learning, but it's been extremely rewarding from an experience point of view. And from that developed this new entity that started tackling corruption. So that's how the original OUTA set up. OUTA then stood for Opposition to Urban Tolling Alliance. And in 2016, we got a lot of requests from the public to tackle maladministration and corruption in government, and we decided we would do so on one condition. The public supported us, and support us they did, and we supported them by standing with them in case they got summonses from e-tolls. And the journey, I must say, has been incredibly, there's nothing more powerful than people that stand together on a cause that is a rightful cause to challenge. And you see government suffering this crisis of legitimacy because it has not done its homework on a scheme that was always going to fail. And so it has failed, but the government's still got to go through the formal process of pulling the plug.
On a personal level, so have you been full-time occupied with OUTA since then?
Yeah, so in 2012, once we got the interdict towards the end of 2012, I entered into an exit strategy with Avis. Full-time, I had to consult because for the first 3 years, we had to live off our savings. There wasn't income. I had to got some consulting jobs. And by the way, business pulled out of funding OUTA because it was funded initially by business, which was a business initiative to challenge this decision. And then government officials on the boards of the big companies to which the car rental industry belongs to started pulling out. We could see what was happening. Government was practicing its bullying tactics and this attrition through lawfare strategy, which it applies to NGOs who challenge them. A very clear strategy, and that's why many NGOs die, is because government just leans on them heavily and dries up their funding. So what the blessing in disguise for that is what we had to now become relevant not to business, because business is notorious for being scared to challenge government. They would rather tender to make the rope to hang this country with than to stand up and challenge government on a rational decision, which is what it was. We had to challenge them. So we had to now become relevant to the real people. That's the citizens of this country. And so we changed our mechanism to crowdfunding from the public, and we stood up and we said, we will defend every single individual who gets a summons on one condition, that we have enough funds to do so. We're not going to make legal firms rich. We had to employ our own lawyers because this is a matter that needed fast work, and we had to save a lot of money because the law firms make tons of money out of litigation, and we were going to defend them. So we employed our own advocate, 7 lawyers, investigators, and so we started doing all these other projects. Since then, we've done 154 projects, e-tolls being one, although it's the biggest one. We have completed 55% of those with an 83% success rate. We've been tackling issues in the water, in the energy sector, the water sector, the transport sector, education sector. It's been an incredible journey of restructuring, and I guess we call it giving birth to an organization that is an effective civil intervention organization with a difference to the standard NGO. We don't just expose. We hold government's feet to the fire. We hold them accountable. We go after them personally in their capacity if they're involved in corruption and maladministration. And that has been in the most rewarding situation that I can ever recall in my life. And because what we've gone has gone from a 5-person organization in 2016 to a 48-person organization now. Wow. With structure, with governance, with a lot of learning, with project management skills. And we're giving birth to new divisions now, new strategies, which we believe is going to change this country going forward.
You spoke earlier on about government leaning on the donors, leaning on business. Did they lean on you? Did they try and make life for you difficult personally, especially at the time of the e-tolls issue?
Well, not personally. There were certainly incidences where I could see. So first of all, the leaning was heavily on the company that I was working for. I saw the mails. I saw the mails that presidency had to start threatening Avis to withdraw its account because Avis was the supplier of car rental and leasing services to government at the time or to the presidency. The mails from Sanral to put pressure on them to pull out. My bosses never put pressure on me in any way, but I could see that what was happening was an undercurrent of very strong difficulties. Initially we were followed. My phone has been tapped, but I've never felt unsafe. I've never felt never been personally threatened, but we were always aware that behind the scenes they were watching exactly what we're doing, who was funding us, who we're engaging with, who was behind, because they couldn't believe that the small organization of a few people at the time had the immense power of getting the public to stand up. And when you get middle-class society, these are the vehicle owners and that, who are very fearful of going to jail and breaking the law in this country. You know that, the history. When you get them to exercise their power and stand against a law, an irrational law, and rightfully standing against it, in the numbers that we were able to achieve, I don't think government believed that we could do it with such a few number of people. And the reason why we were able to do it is because we utilized social media well. We engaged very well with the media. We were always accessible to them, like we are when people ask us to please come in to be available to give our stories. We never fobbed the media off. We became relevant to them, and we told the facts as they were. We told the truth. We told this is what the issue is. We challenged the propaganda that Sanral and government and the Department of Transport put out. We engaged with whistleblowers. We got our facts right. We did our research right. And I guess this is what the power of the narrative is. You can swing economic and change people's minds when you use the narrative and tell the story properly. And that's what we did. And we've learned a lot in the communication skills of civil activism.
Fascinating stuff. Time for us to take the first break. When we come back, we continue the conversation with Wayne Duvenage. Welcome back. So we are in conversation with Outer's Wayne Duvenage. Prior to the break, we spoke about those early days, the e-tolls issue, how Wayne personally got involved, and how things developed from there. Now, a number of years have passed, still on the issue of e-tolls. The gantries are still there. Some people are paying. We hear that the majority are defiant. They're not paying. The system is not working. The Premier has been for some time now saying that this has cost them politically. It has cost them at the polls, at the elections. It's been a key issue. He's at odds publicly with the finance minister. The president seems to be sitting on the fence. How do you analyze the current situation in as far as e-tolls are concerned?
So what has happened is the civil defiance and disobedience campaign has been extremely successful. So what has happened is government borrowed the bonds to pay for the upgrade. By the way, they borrowed twice as much as they should have. This road should never have cost us more than 9, maximum 10 billion rand. We paid 18 billion rand for it. Why do we say that? Is we've done a lot of research in that space. We could have got double the length of the freeway. And then since we accused Sanral of this, the Competition Commission did acknowledge that there was collusion on the roads, and then we got engineers and quantity surveyors and that to give us and QSs to give us all the input, and we could see. On top of that, we found out that the ETC contract, which was won at 6.7 billion rand, and that was the tender amount. Sanral showed us. They displayed those slides in many of their presentations, only for us to learn when we went to court that the contract they signed with ETC was for 9.8 billion rand. And so you can see that there was a lot of inflated costs. Now, how do you get money offshore? You do deals with foreign companies. And this is what this smells of. And then, so the administration costs of toll collection in this country for this project came to 61% of the finance cost. The world average of the administration fee is around 10%. So the scheme was born in sin, is what we said. It was really, really wrong. So where do we stand today? Well, after the first 6 months, when the public were threatened with criminal records or charges being brought against them, their licenses would be withheld, It's so sad when the government resorts to threats and coercion tactics like that. But that's what they did, and they managed to get the compliance rates up by June 2014 to about 40%. Now, this scheme needs 80 to 90% compliance to win. Around the world, our research shows when you start getting below 80%, the 80% who are paying get a little bit angry with the fact that 20% are getting away with it, and it starts to spiral downwards because people learn how to circumvent the system, and then it costs government too much money to try and chase the 20% who aren't paying, and it gets worse and worse. We saw that in Portugal, we saw it in Texas. We even saw some schemes not even get off the ground because the public buy-in wasn't good. So we warned government that you don't have the public buy-in, it's not going to work. They said, we'll get the public buy-in, we'll force them. And they tried. Within the first 6 months, they got to 40% compliance. And thereafter, after David Makura got into power, and he raised his objections to the scheme, and the Minister, Dipuo Peters at the time, mentioned in Parliament that they couldn't turn criminals or bring criminal charges against the public who didn't pay. Those two factors alone gave rise to the decline of the compliance and OUTA's launch of the ETOL defence umbrella, where we said we'll defend everyone who's summonsed because government was summonsing them, and the public was saying to us, well, now that the technicalities of this messy court case are over, are we going to stay or are we going to fold? Because we had no funds. We'd spent all our money on an expensive court case. And so what happened was we said we'd stay on condition we had the funds to defend them, and the public came on board. And the compliance levels have dropped to right now they're down at 20%. Now, that amount of money that they're getting every month, around 60 million rand, just covers the collection costs. So what you're doing is you're collecting the money to pay the collections. Nothing is going into the tarmac, nothing is going into the bonds. 6 years of this empirical evidence, the scheme has failed completely. So what we say to Tito Mboweni and the Minister of Transport, it's all very well for you to say, no, the user-paid schemes, we're going to stick with ETOLs. What we're reminding them all the time is, yes, you might be sticking with the fact that the gantries are there, the lights are on, and you're sending the people the bills, but no one's paying. Only 20%. Those 20% are the corporate companies who don't want to challenge government, the same people who ran away from us, and a few government departments and a handful of individuals who don't want to break the law. 80% of the public, 80% are defying your law, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've stopped summonsing them. You can't blacklist them because the Credit Bureau Association said to SANRAL, we will not allow any of your default judgments to be listed in people's credit ratings, and all of these things have collapsed around government. And yet they cannot make this decision. They are like deer in the headlights. They just don't know how to acknowledge they got it wrong and how to pull the plug. So we say to the public, just keep defying it, and you force them to pull the plug in the long run. So right now, it's just limping. It's on life support. This is a win for the public, and we believe the government's going to make the decision in the next 2 weeks, by the 16th of December. Well, they've been saying this since August. They keep pushing the date out. We have to keep reminding them that they're getting their facts wrong. The other day, the minister said, well, we can't pull out of the scheme until we found an alternative because we have to keep the revenue flowing. And we had to remind him, say, Mr. Mboweni, what revenue is flowing? The revenue that's flowing is just going to the company who's collecting the money, and any profits going offshore. If you starve that and you close that system down, you don't lose any revenue. It's only the collection process that loses the revenue.
What about the bonds then? If they have to shut this down, how do they service the bonds? We see that government is cash-strapped with everything else that's happening at Eskom and SAA and everywhere else. Absolutely.
So we never for 1 minute did we say we don't want to pay for these roads. Ultimately, society pays for them. We have to pay for the infrastructure. So the fact they borrowed double the amount that they should have is one issue. But we park that. We have to settle now 20 billion rand bond. Well, what we've said to government is, settle those bonds in exactly the same way as you finance 86% of SANRAL's roads, through Treasury grants. That's how they've been financing them. In fact, if you go back to 2007, when the ETOL decision was made, 2007 or 2008, SANRAL was receiving about 5 billion rand a year from Treasury to finance the non-tolled routes throughout the country, about 18,000 kilometers. And we said, this is 1% of that 86%. So how you finance 86% of SANRAL's road network, you need to finance the Gauteng one. It's an existing road infrastructure. That will cost you about another 2 billion rand, 2.2 billion rand a year. If your coffers are dry, Minister Treasury, well, then you need to look at the fuel levy, which feeds into your coffers. At that stage, it was about 24 billion rand a year. We said increase the fuel levy by 10 cents. It will give you the 2.2 billion rand you need to finance the Gauteng Freeway project. People then started saying, but why should it go to the fuel levy? Why should the country pay? Well, we're paying for roads through our fuel levy here that I don't drive on, that you don't drive on, and these are not Gauteng's roads. They are South Africa's roads. The South African economy benefits from this. 36% of the South African economy is driven in the fiscus by Gauteng. And we have this little 1% of this road network that needed upgrading. And quite frankly, the more productive and the quicker people get to and from work and goods to and from markets in Gauteng, you make the country richer. So we said use your existing mechanisms, use the existing facilities, and if you don't have the money, increase the fuel levy by 10 cents to get that money. Guess what they went and did? They've increased the fuel levy since then, right up to now, by 2.35 rand. So the fuel levy has gone up from 24 billion to 75 billion rand a year. The 2 billion rand a year for Gauteng's network upgrade is there. They just need to extract it. And if they need to increase it by another 10 cents now, they must do that. Obviously, it's a bit more now because there's interest which they haven't paid. But those bonds were given to them by PRC. They can renegotiate the bonds, renegotiate the terms, the payment periods. PRC is very close to government. They can do this easily. For some strange reason, they're finding it difficult.
Is there a political implication here if they were to go to this route and scrap e-tolls? What are they fearful of?
We don't know. We can only think that there are people enjoying some of the revenue, the 60 million rand a month, that makes it difficult for them to do so. There are a lot of supplier companies into ETC. You must understand there's guarding contracts, catering contracts, computer contracts. There's a lot of money that flows into the suppliers. And if you look at the owners of those organizations, you see links to ANC. And we say it outright. ANC is linked to a lot of revenue flows and a lot of contracts with state-owned institutions in this country. You just have to have a look at Chancellor House's investments in Hitachi, which was part of building Medupi. The fact that Medupi and Kusile have been gone on for 3 years longer than they should have, twice the length of time, and now costing 2 to 3 times the price, which we have to eventually pay for, smacks of corruption. And we've seen enough of this. We've seen it at SAA. We see it everywhere. The politicians have messed things up. The politicians' hands are deep in the cookie jar here. And I have no doubt that this is a similar situation on e-tolls. That's one of the reasons we believe why they're finding it difficult to make that decision. The other might be that, government finds it hard to eat the humble pie on the bad decisions they make. But we say to them it's actually quite easy because it was made with the different people at the time.
The Zuma administration.
The Zuma administration. So in actual fact, politically, you can score big points here. But the elections are all over. There's no political pressure right now. So we think they're just enjoying some of the sweet water that's coming out of the deal at the moment.
Time for the next break. When we come back, we continue the discussion with Wayne Duvenage. Welcome back. So in studio this evening, we've got Outer's Wayne Duvenage. We've spoken thus far primarily about e-tolls. We move a little further beyond that now. What else has Outer been busy with in recent years, especially after you after the whole e-tolls challenge kind of settled?
Yeah, so after we launched the e-toll defense umbrella in 2015, early in 2016, we changed kept the acronym of Outer, changed from Opposition to Urban Tolling Alliance to the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. This came as a result of the call from society to ask us, go beyond e-tolls. There's so much at that stage, although the term state capture hadn't been coined, we could see what was happening. Kandla was headlines every day. SAA started coming to the fore, Dudumnyeni and so forth. So we said, sure, we will do that again on condition that we got the funds to do so, to build the team. Because what we need to do is introduce a project management structure that would be able to tackle the various areas of state on the corruption and maladministration. So we built this team, as I said, from 5 to 48 people now, and we've taken on another 150 plus projects since then, and we grew it, slowly, systematically. We had to go through some real shifts because Because as you grow an organization in 3 years from that size, it might sound small from 5 to 50 people almost, but it has an immense pressure because as you're growing, you're putting people into positions, then you're finding you have square pegs in round holes, you have to restructure the organization. There were a couple of incidences where some of the executives were trying to hijack the organization. We had to fire a few people. We had to fire an individual who had misrepresented himself in his qualifications. So you have these unnecessary dynamics that are playing out. But fortunately, we had the core team there, and over time, we've built an incredible team of people who are so passionate and motivated about the work that we do. As I said, lawyers, investigators, project managers, communications experts. We do a lot of engaging with the media. And so we stopped things like the BNP Capital deal that SAA was trying to do, channel financing to a boutique company. We've been involved in the Highlands Water, Lesotho Highlands Water project. There's a big project going on there. We've just lodged our papers and our submission on NHI in our new division, which is the public governance division under Heinrich Vollmink, that is now working with the anti-corruption strategy. We were very involved in the state capture. We made a number of submissions, and we have a Rudy Heineke who's become a specialist in unpacking state capture. We've got the Gupta leaks. We've got other leaks of other companies linked to the Guptas. We're exposing money laundering of international banks now. Salim Essa, Anosh Singh, all of these people caught up in this web. We've got a lot of good information which we're feeding through to the NPA, the Special Investigations Units and the Hawks. They're engaging with us. So we're finding that there's certain elements within government now are very keen to engage with us because we can assist them, and they have been decimated. And then the other side, we're dealing with and exposing stuff with the National Lotteries Commission. As I said, SANRAL, we're worried about the long-distance concessionaires. Eskom, we were very involved in the multi-year price determination input, exposing what was going wrong there, putting NERSA under pressure not to allow those increases in the tariffs. And that's just a handful. I can assure you there are a lot of other fast-moving projects, water and Hammanskraal, getting now involved in local government issues as well. So it's been, introducing a formalized process on how we select our projects has been quite interesting because we can't do everything. We have got hundreds of projects coming. We've got hundreds of whistleblowers engaging us, giving us good information on what's wrong. And we're getting there, but it's a methodical process, and it doesn't move as fast. I mean, the Dudu Mnyeni case that we bought, the delinquent director application, we bought that 2.5 years ago. It's only coming to fruition now. So one thing we've learned in this game is you have to have resilience, and you have to be in for the long run, and you have to have good people, and you've got to pay the market-related salaries to stay. And that's what we're doing, and we're doing it well.
Is the funding still coming from the public?
It comes all from the public and small and medium-sized businesses. It's crowdfunding. Never underestimate the power of lots of people giving small amounts. Our average donation is 120 Rand a month. People go on, they sign on our website at auto.co.za. It takes 5 minutes. They sign the debit order. They can stop it at any time with us. They can change the amounts. We get a lot of people are phoning in and upping their amounts, increasing the amounts because of the good work we're doing. And we are 100% crowdfunded by the public. And as I said, lots of small and medium-sized businesses. And I guess what we sense it gives them is this feeling that they are now active citizens. They don't have to go out there. They don't complain. When they're sitting around the dinner tables and with their friends and people are complaining, they say, well, stop complaining. Why don't you join out and become an active citizen? With that money, they will change this country. And that's the journey we're on. And there's this saying by, I think, Edmund Burke, that said, the biggest mistake is when people do nothing because they think they can only do a little. Never underestimate the power of that 120 Rand, because with that, we're able to pay the salaries of our staff and our rent and so forth.
At the moment, one can't blame for South Africans for being somewhat despondent. You just switch on the radio, switch on the telly, open up a newspaper. It's SA going into business rescue. It's Eskom going into emergency, load shedding. You hear all of these things. The government doesn't seem to have a plan. Last year, there was this Ramaphoria. People were optimistic, I suppose, maybe to an unrealistic extent. Zuma's gone, Ramaphosa is coming, he sounds better, he looks better, more confidence, elections have come and gone, things have not improved significantly. In this climate, what would you say should now be the role of civil society?
So, I mean, you're quite right. There's extreme frustration. We shouldn't be in this position that we are in. But we must always remember that this is the backlog and the hangover of state capture under Jacob Zuma's era. It's not going to take overnight, but they are moving too slowly. But what we are seeing in our engagements with the enforcement authorities is that the decimation of the NPA and the Hawks and the Special Investigations Unit, Assets Forfeiture Unit and so forth, has been deep. There are still people inside that are barriers. Those are being taken down and the work is being done. But what this NPA doesn't want to do is to run and not get the facts. So they're being quite methodical. So in a nutshell, we don't blame people for being frustrated. This country's in depression. And people are leaving, and we can't afford to have the talent leaving. But if you just go back 2 years where Jacob Zuma was still in power, Sean Abrams at the NPA, Tom Moyane in SARS, that's all gone. There is good work that's being done. The wheels of justice are starting to turn. The rule of law is starting to flow again. Bongani Bongo, recently the previous Minister of State Security, I think, is now being is charged. He's the first of the big fish. There are many to come. We believe when the rule of law flows, and flow it will, and it is starting to flow, 2020 is going to be the year where a lot of people who are wealthy people are going to now be held accountable and go to jail. And of that we are sure because we know what's happening behind the scenes. So SAA should have been in debt rescue a long time ago. We do not need an SA. We've got to obviously watch the jobs and try and privatize it. Eskom is on the mend, but it has got a debt hole that is big to fill. It's going to take some time. So we're on the precipice. But, you know, we've always said you can do two things. You can do nothing or you can do something. We believe that we can pull this country out of the fire. We can salvage what this country's gone through in the past. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of hard work. We say stay and fix. There are the local elections coming up in 18 months. We see and hear good plans to introduce and grow civil intervention and civil society's role in the local elections. And we're not going to talk too much about that, but there are great plans afoot that are coming. And we believe that if civil society's oversight, and we're seeing it already in Parliament, we're engaging a lot in the various committees, there's a recognition that civil society has to play a bigger role in oversight and so forth. So things are going to get better. That's all I can say. I can feel it. We can see it. The green shoots of the correction is coming. But it's not fast enough, and it's frustrating. But we've got to cut through the frustration. And we've got to look at the good things that are happening, and we've got to collectively go and fix this country.
National health insurance is also something that has generated quite a bit of debate. What are your concerns around that?
Well, the national health insurance, that project's been headed up by Dr. Heinrich Volmink, who used to be a shadow minister of health in Parliament, an ex-MP, who's with us, an incredibly powerful person who's networking with a number of entities and people who are quite influential in this space. We're putting together a reference group, which we hope the government will acknowledge, and we're getting good signs of that. What you can't do is shoot from the hip on NHI. NHI, people are conflating that with universal healthcare. So let's be clear on one thing. We have to have universal healthcare. You do not want this disparate system where the poor have to drive past a hospital and try and get to a government hospital and die on the way because they just couldn't stop here. It would be nice if you and I can go into any hospital, and have good treatment. So that's the problem. We've got to fix state health at the same time, and we've got to introduce NHI, which is just a funding mechanism. It is one of 11 interventions to bring around good universal healthcare. Now, is it an easy task? No. Is it an overnight task? Not at all. So we have found 6 flaws in NHI. We have put that in our submission last week to government. We hope that they're going to engage with us meaningfully. And one thing we're sure of is that we will attract the attention of government to make sure that if they do introduce NHI, it's done properly, removing any opportunities for corruption and making sure that civil society has oversight and that the mechanisms that separate and ensure good governance are going to be in place. Without that, we will fight. We will fight government to get it right, and we will not allow NHI to go through in its current format.
In as far as the landscape is concerned, do you think we are slowly but surely starting to win the fight against corruption? If you read the news, you would get the opposite impression.
Yeah.
Perhaps it speaks to what you said earlier on, that there is progress, but it's too slow. But if you look at it more deeply, and if you look at it, I suppose, more holistically, do you see light at the end of the tunnel? Because corruption seems to be central, whether you talk SAA, ESCOM, everywhere. Even a lot of the concern around NHI is not in the concept or in the details of it. It's around who is going to police the process, and will it just become another cash cow for those who are corrupt?
Yeah, so those are the concerns that we've got now. Corruption has become endemic right down to local government level. I said earlier on, when it comes to local elections in 18 months' time, if we can arrest that situation through various initiatives, I think you'll start to see that we'll fix it at that level. I do believe that when we look at the various boards now, that the corruption is slowing right down, that they are addressing it. We met with Eskom's executive, and they are now putting in mechanisms to hold the previous executives to account. That's what we want. We're holding Dudumneni to account. We have an appointment coming up with the SA board, although that might change now with this new setup, to hold the previous directors to account. What we're asking in Denel and everywhere, your role as board members is now broader than just trying to salvage these companies, but to go and make the arrests, because you got the minutes of the meetings, you got the contracts, you've got all the evidence of the wrongdoing. And when that starts happening, which is happening, as we see, and in state-owned institutions where we are able to stop and arrest the corruption that's taking place, then you see the repair process start happening. But last week, the Minister of Arts and Culture went and fired this chairperson of the Robben Island Museum, who had started to uncover corrupt activities or dubious conduct. And we're seeing it in other boards and in other boards that are reporting through to DTI. We're getting a lot of feedback now from businesses saying there are so many things that are still wrong. We're going to go and fix those, but we can only do so when these entities start coming on board and the public and businesses support us. So there's a lot of work to do. I'm quite positive, but not openly so, overtly so, to say, hey, everything's changed and everything's looking rosy. It's not. Yeah. It's not. We've got a ton of work to do. But at least we don't have the situation that we had in the past. At least in SARS, you see under Edward Kieswetter and Mark King and the great work to fix that up, because through SARS and its empowerment and its opportunities to go and hold businesses to account, we see the Auditor General's new powers and his strong words to go and hold people to account. We see Shamila Betoy and Hermione Crinier assets forfeiture. We see good things happening. So I think we will start getting on top of it and slow it down, but it's going to take a long time. I don't think, not naive enough to say, oh, we'll be a corrupt-free country in a few years. That's not going to happen. We will have reduced corruption. We'll be addressing education, health, safety. We'll be seeing the poorest of the poor benefiting from less corrupt money flowing out of the system and flowing into the system. And that's going to be good for this country. There's more than enough money. We should be the breadbasket of Africa. We should be the powerhouse of Africa. We can get there, and we will get there. But we need to do it together as citizens.
How do citizens who are watching this program, who want to know more about OUTA, engage more with OUTA, apart from donating, which is important, but be part of the process, be part of the effort and the struggle. Apart from the website, what are the other mechanisms?
Well, if you become a supporter, and you don't have to become a contributing supporter, we obviously want that you can choose your amount. Some people give us 20, 30 rand a month, whatever you feel you can afford. But through that process, we send out monthly newsletters, so you get to see and feel what's happening. A lot of our supporters get the news. We're in the news daily, weekly. And then through our website, and then we'll We are starting to engage in other communication platforms. We'll be opening up on WhatsApp Business soon, so people can engage with us through the WhatsApp Business mechanisms. Facebook is an incredibly powerful, engaging platform that we've got 150,000 supporters. We have launched Outer Hour. It's a weekly show at 7 o'clock, live streamed on Facebook and on our website, where we talk about and people can engage with our various managers. Heinrich's on there, Stefanie Fick, Advocate Stefanie Fick, who heads up our legal division, Julius Clanans, who heads up our local division. They're on there all the time, and we're talking to and engaging with our supporters. So there are multiple mechanisms or platforms, and we're going to be expanding on those even more.
Lastly, I mean, South Africa, I suppose, needs many more people like Wayne Duvenage, people who are willing to make sacrifice and take up the fight and fight the good fight, notwithstanding all of the pressure. How do you foresee your role in Outer? I'm sure you mentioned early on you found it very fulfilling. Do you still at times miss the corporate environment? Are you still committed to Outer in the short to medium term?
Very committed in the long term. But you know, this is, you don't invest. This is an investment into society. This is a non-profit organization. There's no shares, there's no equity build-up for myself, but I will always be involved in Outer one way or the other, whether I'm on the board as a non-exec, as a chair in the future, that you can be sure of. What we are planning in the near future are these new strategies that are going to ensure that Outer's work and the creativity and the innovation that we bring to enabling civil society to become more powerful through the various residents associations and through the local government processes without getting into the political space. There's quite a lot of innovative stuff that we're doing there. You must remember that Outer is not the only civil action movement out there. There's a lot of good organizations, Section 27, Corruption Watch, Helen Suzman Foundation, and these entities also doing work in their specific areas. And there are thousands of small civil action movements around the country that are also doing good work. If we can all start working on the similar wavelengths to ensure that citizens are empowered to go and make the difference, and wherever they can, then I think we're gonna get there. I'm only as good as the team I have. I'm only as good as my wife and my family and people that support me. We've got an amazing team of highly effective people that work at Outer, these project managers and legal people. So we just want to grow that. If we get more, we do more. That I can assure you. If we double our number of supporters, we'll double our staff, because this is all about people energy, and it's about using the Constitution, using the mechanisms and systems we have to go and hold the feet of government to the fire when they waste our taxpayers' money.
Wayne Duvenage, thank you so much for your time this evening, and all the best. Continue the good
pleasure.
fight.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
And to the viewers, until next time, now when you hear the name Outer or you hear the name Wayne Duvenage, you have a better understanding of the good work that they do. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.